The whispering hall stood on the edge of the town, hidden by tangled trees and shrouded in an eternal mist that seemed reluctant to leave. It was a place of whispered rumors and half-forgotten warnings. The townsfolk avoided it, treating it not as a relic of history, but as a scar on the land. Its rotting wooden walls sagged like tired bones, yet something about it still felt alive, watching, waiting. Tonight, however, curiosity had outpaced caution. For friends Emma, Tom, Riley, and Sarah found themselves standing at its crumbling entrance, lanterns in hand. The air was heavy, colder than it should have been for late autumn, and the faint sound of a chilling wind hissed through the cracks in the structure. "Are we really doing this?" Riley asked, his voice trembling. "We have to," Emma replied, clutching the worn book to her chest. The leather cover was cold and slick, and the strange symbols embossed on its surface seemed to pulse faintly under her fingers. "If we don't, it's just going to sit there, unanswered. Don't you want to know what happened here?" Tom glanced up at the sagging roof, where the dripping moisture had left streaks of rust-colored stains. "Yeah, but there's a reason no one comes here. Emma, this place, it's not right." Emma ignored him. She had been obsessed with the hall since she stumbled across the old book in her grandmother's attic. The warnings, the strange diagrams, the pages marked with a language no one could decipher, all of it pointed back to this cursed place. And now that they were here, she felt a pull she couldn't explain, as if the hall itself was calling her. The group stepped inside. The air changed immediately, growing thicker, suffused with a damp chill that sank into their bones. Their lanterns flickered, their small circles of light barely penetrating the dense shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. The rotting wood beneath their feet groaned with each step, and the smell of mildew and decay was overwhelming. As they moved deeper into the hall, strange sounds began to surround them. At first, it was subtle, a faint rustling, like fabric brushing against wood. Then came the whispers, low and indistinct, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. "I don't like this," Sarah muttered, clutching Riley's arm tightly. "None of us do," Tom said. "Let's just get this over with." The main room was worse than they imagined. It was larger than it had any right to be, the walls stretching into impossible heights, as if the hall existed outside the normal rules of space. A long table stood at the center, its surface carved with intricate, almost hypnotic patterns. Blackened candles, melted and warped, lined the edges. The dripping from the ceiling was louder here, the splashes forming dark, viscous puddles that seemed to ripple despite the stillness of the air. Emma approached the table, her lantern casting long, trembling shadows that stretched across the walls. She placed the book in the center, its presence feeling wrong, as if the table had been waiting for it. "This isn't a good idea," Riley whispered. "It's the only way," Emma replied, though her voice wavered. She opened the book, revealing pages filled with jagged, alien symbols. She didn't recognize the language, but the words seemed to form themselves in her mind, urging her to speak them aloud. When she began to read, the room reacted immediately. The whispers grew louder, angrier, until they were an unrelenting cacophony. The temperature dropped sharply, and the lanterns dimmed, their light struggling against the encroaching darkness. The walls seemed to shudder, and from the corners of the room, the shadows deepened, taking on strange, flickering shapes. "Emma, stop," Tom shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the oppressive noise. Emma couldn't stop. The words poured out of her as if she were no longer in control, her voice rising and distorting. The others clutched their heads, the whispers drilling into their minds like needles. When the final word left Emma's lips, the hall went silent, the lanterns extinguished, plunging them into pitch black. Then came the sound, a deep, guttural growl, low and resonant, vibrating through the floor. The group froze, paralyzed with fear. From the darkness emerged a figure, its form impossible to comprehend. It shifted and fragmented, its edges bleeding into the shadows around it. Its face was an abyss, a void that seemed to devour light, and its gnarled, dripping hands reached forward, their touch leaving blackened stains in the air. Emma was the first to scream. The unseen force lifted her into the air, her limbs contorting grotesquely as her body twisted in ways no human form should. Her eyes rolled back, and her screams turned into inhuman shrieks as the thing invaded her, filling her with its cursed essence. "Run," Tom shouted, but none of them could move. Their limbs were heavy, pinned by an invisible force. The whispers returned, now sharp and mocking, drilling into their ears. The walls of the hall began to shift and pulsate, the rotting wood peeling back to reveal something alive beneath fleshy, writhing tendrils that reached for them. The dripping from the ceiling turned thick and red, splattering onto their faces as they struggled against their paralysis. One by one, they were taken. Riley was dragged screaming into the shadows, his voice cutting off abruptly. Sarah's eyes filled with terror as a blackened hand emerged from the void, pulling her into the darkness. Tom was the last. He stared into the figure's empty face, his mind unraveling as he felt the full weight of its gaze. His body was lifted, consumed, and then there was silence. By dawn, the whispering hall stood as it always had, its decayed exterior hiding the horrors within. The whispers faded, waiting patiently for the next unfortunate souls to step inside. And deep within, the book lay closed on the table, its pages eager for someone new to read its cursed words.